My name is Baxter. I'm a developer advocate at IBM. I've actually got quite a few questions about what that means. And the consensus is that I have a pretty awesome job. But it means that I get to speak to all you guys. I assume most of you are developers. Everyone developers? Most of you? Okay. So I get to speak to developers like you guys about the awesome stuff that we're doing with Bluemix and play around a lot of technologies and go to different conferences and stuff like that. So, today we're going to talk about Bluemix and what Bluemix is. If you guys are paying attention to the grammar and ODS, we mentioned it a couple times and made some videos about how to know Bluemix and stuff like that. Very great vague references. So we're going to talk about what Bluemix is, why you want to use it, why you want to pay attention to it, and you're not going to use it. You get home today, but where we're going with it and why it's pretty important in the future. So before we get started, I just want to ask the developer. So here, build does anyone build applications on side?
You're very hard to hear.
I'll try to yell. Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Does anyone build applications on a platform besides that? Okay. What other kind of languages do you use? One side. You're .NET. I talked to you in there. Okay. Does everyone build ES-based applications? Yeah. Cool. All right. So before we start talking about Bluemix, and if I get quiet again, she'll be before we start talking about Bluemix, we really should start talking about the app evolution, right? And why Bluemix has come around and what Bluemix has to do with this app evolution. So apps are everywhere today, right? You have them, you used to only be on your laptops or your desktops. Now you have them on your mobile phones, your tablets. And I actually have apps on my TV, in my car, on my watch, right? And we're starting to see applications pervasive in a lot of things that we do every day, right? And really starting with the mobile revolution, the way we interact with our apps and what the expectations we have of our applications is starting to change. It's vastly different, right? It's really easy to now get an application, right? I can go to an app store, download the app. When I go to that app store, I see a whole bunch of reviews about the application. I know what other people are saying about it. Maybe, it makes my decision a little bit easier whether I want to buy the app. They're a lot cheaper, right? Most of the apps I buy are like $1. They're not $50, $100 anymore. Very rarely you buy an app that expensive. And they're really easy to install because of the app store, and they're just as easy to delete, right? And since they're just as easy to delete, the user experience that you get from these apps is like super high, right? Super high quality, very simple, very easy. They want to keep your attention. They want to keep you using the app, and the experience that you have is very important to development. So this is kind of started to translate a little bit over into the enterprise world, right? What we do in our consumer world with our phones, what in our machines at home, is starting to be kind of the norm for enterprise apps as well. We expect the same quality, the same functionality, the same quick, easy updates, all that stuff. All that is now kind of starting to trickle into the enterprise world. And all this app stuff is kind of powered by the cloud. It's made possible by the cloud. You'll notice that the upswing of the cloud and the upswing of apps kind of happen around the same time, right? So the cloud powers these app stores, right? They make it really easy to connect to and download apps from. The cloud powers the apps themselves, right? Most of the apps that you use on your phone today or your browser, right, are powered by the cloud or backed by the cloud. The enterprise not so much, but like I said, it's starting to trickle its way into the enterprise. So this kind of app revolution kind of lays the foundation for what Bluemix is all about. So Bluemix is all about the developer experience, right? So you guys, right? So we're focused on it as a developer. You're focused on speed and flexibility, right? You want to build your app as fast as you possibly can, and you want to get it in the hands of your users as fast as you possibly can, so you can start making money, right? So what kind of things do we really want? We want ease of deployment. I want to be able to deploy my app super fast, super easy. I want to be able to choose the language and the frameworks a lot of times that I use to build my application. In today's apps, especially in the cloud, they're often composed of components that are built out of multiple languages. Right? You may have a portion of your application that's really suited for using Java, or you may have a portion of your application that's really suited for using Go. Right? You combine those two components together, build a set of languages to mobile is a huge thing, right? Everyone expects to have the same experience that they get on their mobile device as they get in their browser, right? So you're absolutely mobile ready. You have some mobile devices. And then we can start talking about the tools that we use as developers and functionalities and what we expect to build these apps, right? So things like continuous integration. Does anyone know what that means? So continuous integration is kind of a very simple concept to understand. Basically means when I commit my code to my source code repository, I want that code to be automatically deployed back out to my users live. Right? So has everyone heard kind of the model that Facebook and Netflix has, where they do multiple deliveries, deployments of their application live multiple times a day? Right? So they don't deploy and put new versions of their apps out once a month, once a year. They do it multiple times a day. And this is made possible because of continuous integration, continuous delivery. And we'll see a little bit of that later on. How powerful it can be. We want visual APIs, right? We want to build our apps out of cool APIs that are well documented, easy to understand, easy to use. And we want our choice of tools. People like to use tools in different ways. Some people like Eclipse, some people like text editors, some people like Sublime, some people like line IDEs nowadays. So these are all very important things. So when we start talking about cloud and deploying our applications to the cloud, we have to kind of start talking about how do you do it, right? Well, there's the old school way, or maybe it's not that old school, but the way that people used to do this is they would do it themselves, right? They would put some server up, some stack to deploy their application to in their own data center. And they would manage the entire stack. So they would own everything from the networking up to the code. That includes storage, virtualization, operating systems, the hardware, the runtime, the middleware, everything, right? It was all controlled by you. Right? This is really good because it gives you ultimate flexibility. Right? You get to choose these components, you get to configure them, you get to put them all together, you get to make all the choices, and you have all the control. The downside to this is that when you go to do this, you deploy your application in this way, it takes a long time. Right? You need to get all that stuff together, and get that all organized, and get that all working before you even deploy your application. Right? And if you're in a kind of a big company like IBM, for example, doing this is a painful process. Right? It's hugely painful. Right? You have to go through layers and layers of approval before you even start thinking about getting your application live, right? And peace smiling in the background. So there's that, and then there's also the time commitment. After you get the thing up and running, you have to maintain it. Right? So if something goes wrong in any of those pieces, it's your responsibility to fix it. And when your users are unhappy, well, it's going to fall on you, right? You have ultimate control, but you also have all the responsibility. And this takes, like I said, takes a long time. So then people said, well, I'm going to offload some of this stuff. I don't really want to deal with all this stack. Right? And this is where we saw the rise of infrastructure as a service. Do people know what that terminology means? Very heard of it? So infrastructure as a service basically means, well, I'm going to go to a service provider, and they're going to provide me with the networking, storage, and servers, and virtualization. Right? So these are companies like Amazon Web Services, right? Or Software. Does everyone know what Software is? Right? It's that company that we bought for $4 billion. So you can go to AWS or Software and say, hey, I want a machine. I want to have this OS on it. I want to have this number of processors. I want to have this much memory. I want to have these hard drives. And give it to you, right? And in a couple minutes, you'll get the machine. You can SSH into it and start working on it. And it's all in the cloud. Okay? And actually, in Software, you can actually get a bare metal machine, not even a virtualized machine, a bare metal machine running in their data center in under 4 hours. In software. So it's really quick and easy to get started with infrastructure as a service. It makes it really easy to get this part of the stack up and running very fast in a few minutes. You're still responsible for the rest of it, right? The OS, the middleware, the runtime, all the data, the code, everything else is still up to you. So this is really good, right? It has a lot of benefits. We've offloaded some of the responsibility to someone else, so if something goes wrong in the networking, the storage, or hard drive dies, or whatever in the machine, that's Software's responsibility. They have some SLAs and guarantees about, getting that stuff all taken care of, but I don't need to worry about it. And then everything else about that, I have to worry about. So there's critical security update to the operating system that falls on me, right? There's some security vulnerability in Windows, you know, I need to fix that. So this is really good, and we can get apps deployed in this model in a couple days, right? Because we get the machine really fast, we just got to worry about getting the software all set up and sticking the app on. But it's not good for some people, right? It's not good enough. We can do a little bit better. And we can do a little better by giving up a little bit more control, right? And this is what we call platform as a service. And platform as a service, basically, everything up from the networking to the runtime is controlled by the service provider. And this is actually where Bluemix falls in. So the only thing you're responsible for in this model is your code and the data. And I know, as a developer myself, that this model rocks because while I can do that IT stuff, I don't like doing it, and I don't want to do it. I'd rather write code, add more features, than deal with installing security updates and making sure all that stuff underneath me is actually working properly. So this is where Bluemix falls in. In this model, your time commitment is very small because you're just worrying about your code and your data. And you get your application deployed in minutes or less. So we went from a very customizable model where we had all control and it took a long time, and we went to this model where I gave up a lot of control because I don't really care about it, and I can do it really quickly. So the obvious question whenever we talk about the cloud is, what about my existing IT resources? Right? I have stuff already running, you know, maybe in software, or I have it running on our data centers. I have network stuff, or I'm running behind a firewall. Do I have to take all that stuff and throw it out into the cloud somewhere? The answer is no, right? So that is not the requirement. We realize this is a huge problem for, especially for the enterprise space where, you know, you have existing stuff that can't go out to the cloud. You need to be able to use that stuff. So we have ways of addressing that. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later. So what kind of stuff, what are the features? I guess there's 6 features here on the slide that make up Bluemix. So we talked about going live in seconds. You can deploy your app in a very short period of time. Bluemix has, besides the infrastructure to run your application, there's a whole set of APIs and services that come along with Bluemix. And these APIs and services eventually are hosted in the cloud, just like Bluemix itself, and allow you to add functionality to your application as a developer. So almost every application needs a database, right? So where do you get that database from? Well, there's a service for that. You need to send mobile push notifications to your mobile users. Well, there's a service for that. You need some type of caching going on between your database and your application code because you want to limit the number of transactions going to the database. There's a service for that. So there's a whole catalog of services you can pick and choose from to integrate with your application to provide extra functionality to your app. On-prem integration, that's what I was just referring to in the previous slide, right? We want this hybrid cloud environment. There's a way to do that in Bluemix as well. DevOps. This is a fairly popular term out there in the developer community. It refers to many different things, but this is where that continuous integration functionality I was talking about at the beginning, and things like agile planning and tracking. So if you're doing agile development, there's tools around that. There's source control monitoring, source control for your applications as well. That falls into that category. We'll see a lot of that a little later. We're going to talk about the cloud. Security is obviously a huge concern. So we have all the security that comes from the soft layer built into Bluemix, because Bluemix is running on top of the soft layer. And then when we talk about the security of your individual applications, there's services that are part of the catalog of Bluemix and allow you to detect potential security problems with your code running in the cloud. And then obviously everyone's big concern is pricing. I'm not the sales guy, but there's many different models for using Bluemix. You can go there today, sign up for free. You can use Bluemix for free for 30 days. After that, you need to give us your credit card, but you can still use Bluemix for free as long as you stay under certain limitations. And then you can do pay-as-you-go or subscription-based. So Mark, you can attest this. It's really easy to enter your credit card.
I will say that I am very effective at taking your money.
But we made it really easy to take your money.
Just like any other, just nothing for me.
top of software. So Bluemix takes advantage of all the functionality that's part of software underneath it, and uses its infrastructure to run your applications. But you're not exposed to that at all. You have no idea. You'd never know that you're running on top of software if I didn't tell you. Bluemix is actually built out of an open source project called Cloud Foundry. So this is a very popular open source project. It's out there on GitHub. There's a number of organizations involved in this project. Everyone from obviously IBM, Pivotal, EMC, VMware, SAP, and many, many more. So many actually that we've had to start a foundation around Cloud Foundry to manage the direction of the project. Much like there's the Eclipse Foundation, you know, the Cloud Foundry Foundation that's kind of have members from all the companies involved there showing the direction for where we're going with the mission. So we've added a few enhancements on top of that open source project. And then you have your runtimes that are running your applications sitting on top of Bluemix. And these runtimes are your things like Java, Node, Ruby, Sinatra, PHP, Python, whatever languages that you're choosing to build your app. Your app uses the runtime and also takes advantage of the services that I was talking about. These services are coming from the IBM Cloud Marketplace, and that contains IBM provided services, so services that IBM is providing from products that they have in the cloud, third-party services from our partners, and then community services, which are basically open source projects that are free to use in the cloud. You can also use services from outside of our cloud, right? So outside of our catalog. So for example, if you wanted to build an app that was going to use Dropbox's APIs, Dropbox isn't in our catalog, but there's nothing stopping you from using their APIs anyways. Okay? So as long as you can connect to whatever API you want to use from the public cloud, you're free to use it. There's no restriction there. So we had a fairly extensive beta period with Bluemix that just ended about a month ago, the beginning of July. I guess that's actually 2 months. And we asked, there was actually 30,000 developers who used the platform. And we asked them, what did you like most about it? And some answers actually surprised me, and some didn't, right? So everyone obviously said, hey, it's really sweet that I can deploy my app in seconds, right? That's really cool. And they said, you know, the last one there about connecting back to your existing IT infrastructure, obviously we expected that to be a huge hit, right? The one in the middle kind of surprised me, but based on when I asked everyone what they heard of continuous delivery, continuous integration, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. So I have a strong open source background where continuous integration, continuous delivery is practiced like commonplace. I'm a VP at Apache, the Apache Foundation, so I mean, we use continuous integration, continuous delivery to manage our open source projects all the time. But apparently, for many other developers, and maybe inside your enterprises, your organizations that you work for, you don't do that, right? Maybe it's because you don't know how to do it, or you don't know about it, or you don't want to invest the time to set it all up, because there is some initial investment to get it all working. But they found that it was really easy to get started using the continuous delivery functionality as part of Bluemix applications. And all the stuff was hosted in the cloud already, so they didn't actually do anything. They didn't really put much of an investment into doing it. It was just parked there, and they could take advantage of it. So that was a huge hit as well. So the best way to actually talk about Bluemix is not really to show you the slides, it's to demo. So most of the rest of the presentation is going to be demos. So I'm at Bluemix.net. If you go to Bluemix.net, you'll see open Bluemix type of page, homepage. I've already logged in just to save us a little bit of time here. You can go to Bluemix.net right now on your laptops, sign up for free, and you can get going like literally in 5 minutes. Okay? But when you do get your user ID and password for Bluemix, you'll log in, you'll be brought to this dashboard. And the dashboard kind of gives you a brief overview of what's going on, all your applications, all the services you're using, how much memory you're using, all that stuff, okay? So right at the top, we see a couple of gauges. And these gauges basically tell you 2 very important things. One, how much memory you're using right now, and how many services you're using. And the reason why those are important is because those are the 2 pieces that we charge you on. Right? So we charge you on the amount of memory you're using for the applications that you have running, and we'll charge you based on the services you're using. So you can see a brief overview right in the beginning here. I'm using 3.5 gigs out of my 8. And I apologize, you can see that the only two options for resolution were like 1280 by 7 something, and then 800 by 600, 800 by 600 militerals. And then right in the middle is all your, basically overview of your app health. So all my applications are up and running. There's a big green check box there. If something was not running, maybe because it, I stopped it, or because it crashed, or whatever, there'd be some red dots below there, and a big red X in the middle. They're just letting me know that something is not running right now. Below that, we have all my applications. So these are just little tiles representing my apps. And below that, I have all the services that those applications are using. So these are the services that I'm using within those applications. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how to deploy an application to Bluemix, the process for doing that, and how easy it is. The application I'm going to build is actually a to-do app, right? And you're probably sitting there running and saying, you can deploy a lame app, right? I realize it's lame, right? I realize it's not, something that you guys are going to build. But that's the point, right? I don't want you to get distracted by the application itself. I want you to focus in on how I actually deploy the application. Because how you do it is the same no matter what the application is, okay? It also makes things a little bit easier as far as walking through the demo. So, and the app is written in, the app I'm going to deploy is actually written in Node.js. And Nathan made a comment yesterday that every demo he's seen from IBM, they always deploy a Node.js application. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not true because Nathan doesn't look at all my demos. I have the same application written in Java. The only reason I'm choosing Node is because it's quicker, right? So I don't want to have to sit here and have to wait longer than I have to. Everyone knows that Java's not the fastest thing all the time. JVM takes time, blah, 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 blah. Doing a Node makes it quicker to deploy. But I have the same app written in Java. Okay? And the code is all open source, so I have to really prove it as well. All right. So to get started deploying the application, I'm going to jump over to the catalog here. And the catalog contains all the services that I was talking about, the runtimes. So the first thing you see when you jump into this catalog is boilerplates. And I'm going to defer talking about these because it depends on the two things below it, so I'm going to come back to it in a second. The second thing you'll see is runtimes, right? So like I mentioned before, these are all the languages that you use to build your application. So there's 4 listed here. You'll see Java, Node, Ruby on Rails, and Ruby Symantec. But don't think that these are the only runtimes we support. Okay? These are the 4 runtimes that are built into Bluemix. The last little circle here says bring your own build pack. So we actually support a number of other languages: Python, PHP, Go, Scala. Maybe the version of Java here uses the Liberty profile. Maybe you want to use Tomcat or Jetty. Or you didn't want to use the IBM JDK, you want to use the Oracle JDK instead. There's all these what we call build packs out there that support all these other runtimes. And basically you can think of a build pack as essentially a runtime with some libraries on top of it that we use to run your code. So if I click on this here and go to browse the build packs here, I get brought to this GitHub page that has a whole list of different build packs here. These are all different languages, there's different servers, if you want to use Apache for PHP, you can use that. If you want to use Nginx, you can use that. If you want to use Zen, you can use that. So there's a whole bunch of different options here. So don't think that because there's only 4 listed on this page, that these are the only 4 things we support. That's not true. We support virtually anything else besides the top 10 because we don't code on Windows. And then below those runtimes are services, right? So these are the things that you add to your application to add functionality. You'll see the first thing here is mobile. So if you need to build a mobile backend for your native mobile device, right? You built an iOS app or you built an Android app, you need a backend to back that application in the cloud. You can do that super easy. The next category is called web and application. This has to be the worst name category I've ever heard in my life because it makes no sense. They might as well call it miscellaneous. I don't know why they didn't choose that. But this category has a whole bunch of services in it, everything from caching to service to send emails. So if you need the ability to send emails to your users. Service for that, there's geolocation services, there's loading pack services, a whole bunch of stuff there. DevOps has Blazemeter and NewRoute. NewRoute is a profiling service for performance, and Blazemeter is a loading pack service. Data management, obviously, is probably one of the most popular categories because this contains all our databases that we support. So you see Clouded, SQL database, which is essentially DB2, ClearDB, which is MySQL, Elephant SQL, which is PostgreSQL, MWLUG, and Redis. Okay. Then we have big data, we have security, we have business analytics, Internet of Things. I wish I had time to do an Internet of Things demo. Super cool stuff. I have this demo that works on my watch that runs on Bluemix. It's super cool. I just don't have time to do that. And then DevOps. So I want to get started building my. I forgot to talk about the boilerplates. So boilerplates. These are essentially a runtime plus one or more services. So they're kind of like getting started applications. So if you are interested in building a Java app that uses a database, there's a boilerplate for that. And you can provision that application, download the code, and see how it all works. There's a boilerplate for mobile cloud. So you need to build a mobile backend for your app. Put this mobile cloud boilerplate, you have everything you need. There's one for Node.js and Internet of Things and etc. So these are kind of like getting started applications. But my app I just want to use Node. So the first thing I'm going to do here is select the Node.js runtime. And what it's going to do is it's going to basically bring us some pricing information, tell me how much it costs. And then I just need to enter a name for my application, so I'm going to call it BlueMix. Okay, and as long as that name is also available as a host name, it will use that name as the host name for my application. So my application is going to be running at blue-studios.mybusiness.net. If that host name is already taken, I can switch the host name and call something else. And when I click create here, essentially what Bluemix is now going to do is going to say, okay, I need to start up an application that's using Node.js, so I'm going to go do that. And it's going to basically provision a very simple application using Node.js in the cloud for me. And you'll notice that when I click create, it didn't ask me about the operating system that I was going to use, how much memory my application needed, the hard drive size, the networking, none of that, right? I didn't tell it anything about that. And that's on purpose, right? It's the whole point of the platform as a service is not to expose that to you, because you don't really care. Okay? So what Bluemix is doing right now is going off and starting up, actually just started, a very simple Node.js application on this machine in Bluemix. The only thing I really know about it is that it's running at this URL here, blue-choose.myBluemix.net. And if I go to that URL, we see my simple application up and running. That took less than a minute to do. So you guys can whip out your phones and your laptops and go to blue-choose.myBluemix.net and get this application live right now, running in the cloud. Okay? The next thing I told you that my application is to do, or maybe I didn't tell us, but it's a to-do application, and I need to store my to-dos somewhere. So I need to store it in a database. So I need a database for my application. I'm going to choose Cloud. I can choose one of the other databases if I want to, but I'm just going to choose Cloud. So I'm going to click Add Service. It's going to bring me back to the catalog. And I'm going to scroll down my data management service here. Select my Cloud database. It's going to tell me about Cloud pricing, kind of similar to the Node.js runtime. I'm going to pick a name, so I'm going to call it to-do-MGB. So for those of you who don't know, it's based on Crouch. And click create. And now what's going to happen is actually Bluemix is going to go out to Cloud and say, hey Cloud, Ryan needs a database. And Cloud's going to say, hey, I like Ryan a lot, I'm going to give him a database. And not only am I going to give him a database, but I'm going to give him a URL to that database and a username and password to access that database. Right now, Bluemix can just say, hey, you need to restart before you can use the database. I'm going to click cancel this because I'm going to restart in a second, so I don't want to do it twice. But it's going to give me a URL, username, and password to connect to that database because I need that stuff, right? It's all secure and everything, right? So how do I get it? If I click show credentials here, this might be hard to see. But essentially, in this JSON object that's shown here is a username, a password, and a URL. Okay? And this JSON object is made available to me, my application, at runtime in an environment variable. So what I have to do in my code is basically say, I'm going to go to this environment variable, read what's in the environment variable, parse the JSON object, get the username and password I need, and the URL, and then I can connect to the database. Okay? pattern is extremely popular and extremely common with every service you add to your application in Bluemix. Every service is secured by using a password and is located remotely in some URL, and you need that information in order to access that service, so this is how it's provided to you at runtime. Okay? The other thing I really want is source control for my application, right? I want someplace to store my source code. So I'm going to put this add git button right here at the top. And Bluemix is going to go ahead and create a Git repository for me in the cloud as well. It's going to ask me if I want to populate that repository with a very simple starter application that's running right now. And I don't really want that because I'm just going to overwrite the code anyway, so I'm going to check that box. Click continue. And this Git repository will be created for me, and at the top here we'll see a URL to my Git repo show up once it's done here. This is the terrible part of building my demo, so you have to wait for them. So I finished, and I have my Git URL right here at the top of my page, so I can copy that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clone that Git repo. Now I'm going to do it with the command line, but I know a lot of people here use other tools, like maybe use the Git plugin in Eclipse, or use an external tool like SourceTree or something like that. You can use those tools if you want. I'm comfortable with the command line, so I'm going to do this in the command line just to be a little bit quicker. I think everyone can probably see my terminal in the mirror. So I'm going to do git clone and paste in my Git URL, and it's going to clone my Git repo. And it's empty, right? I didn't really populate it with anything. The only thing that's really in there right now is my CD and so it's used. The only thing that's in there is a license and a README file, right? So it's pretty much empty. So now I'm going to go off and do my code, right? I want to build my new application on the right some code to build up my functionality. Luckily, you guys know how to watch me do that. I already written the code. So I got it right here. So I'm just going to copy it over into this folder. Folder, I just clone my Git repo to. It's just asking if I want to replace the README. So now if I do a Git status, we'll see that there's a modify file and some on-track files. So I'll do git add and add everything to my Git repo. And now if I do Git status, you see there's a bunch of new files that are part of my Git repo. Okay?
Ryan, do you guys have any against SourceTree?
No, I actually have SourceTree installed on my computer, but this was just easier.
Because I totally use that right here.
Okay.
I use it every day for the last 2 days.
So you don't use the command line then?
No.
Okay.
I don't use the command line for any.
You're not a real developer. All right, we'll do it this way.
I'm not a developer, I'm an engineer.
Alright, I want to put this directory.
Since you already did it in the command line, I don't believe it works.
I just deleted it. Alright, there we go. So I'm going to clone this directory.
I'm trying to help you out with future demos.
That's fine. I mean, I've never had anyone give me that feedback. Alright, let's do this one more time. Does this confuse you anything about copy of code? Alright. Now if I open this up, we have a bunch of unstaged files, right? Stuff that I haven't checked in my Git repo. Okay. I'm going to stage them all. I'm going to enter my commit message. I have a fake commit message, which is initial commit. Should be everyone's favorite commit message. And commit. It's going to commit them. Now I have something to push back up to my Git repo remotely. And before I do that, I'm going to let you in a little secret that when I set up this Git repo, here in Bluemix, it actually also set up a continuous delivery pipeline. So we were talking about this before. Basically, all that's going to mean is that as soon as I click this push button to push it out to the remote Git repo, Bluemix is actually going to deploy the application code for me to my app here running in Bluemix. So when I do this, let this go, we can jump over to this delivery pipeline thing here in Bluemix. We'll see all my applications here. We should see all my applications. And we'll see whether some of them have Git repo set up for them, some of them don't have Git repo set up for them, some of them have the pipeline turned on, some of them don't. Nathan screwed me all up. Sorry. You can see that it's actually deploying. You see my Bluetooth app just stopped the health decrease, and now it's going to start stuff back up in a second. So it is actually doing it. I don't know if I can show this to you in a little bit. Let me jump over here for a sec.
Every day restart, you say you want that.
It's doing the restart right now, actually. Yeah. It's actually redeploying the app. It just didn't show up in that UI.
Is it all deploying that because it's the master branch?
You can set it up
in other branches.
You can set it up to only deploy from certain branches. Yeah. This is a whole bunch of other stuff that you're going to see in a second that requires a whole other set of explanations that I just don't have to do, but it will allow me to show you that deployment is happening. It might actually finish before I actually get to it. So we have a deployment here that's running right now, and it just finished. So it's now says okay. This is the delivery pipeline configuration stuff that you can go in and do configure. The default configuration is fine for the application right now, but you see that the app is back up and running here in Bluemix. I have a nice green circle that's now up and running. And if I go back to this URL, you say here's the code I just deployed. Okay? So that took a very small amount of time. Right? I cut out the part about writing the application, right, which is the most difficult part, right? The actual deployment stuff didn't take me a lot of time, right? And so I can go ahead and create some to-dos just to prove this actually works. So I'm going to say, write some code, deploy code, click here, see where I a few things. And if we jump back over to Cloud here, I can go out to my Cloud dashboard, and I can go and see. You can see the to-dos that are actually stored in the database right now. So Cloud is a NoSQL database. I'm going to jump over to the database here. Here are the documents that are stored in there. And so I'm just good. I mean, it's 100% data. Oh, this is okay. This is the to-dos that are stored in the basically JSON object here in the database. Okay. So that's it. I mean, that's pretty much the end of that demo. More slides. So since you guys you all told me that you're download developers, you're probably now asking yourself this question, right? What about download? Right? And this is my lovely daughter. And I imagine that this is the face you're probably looking at. Like, what do you mean you can't deploy your NSF to download? Your NSF to Bluemix and you're doing this angry look. I don't know what I was doing at the time. I took this picture, but she was not happy about it. The good news is that I can't deploy your NSF to download, and Kramer made some references to this in his OTS saying that we're investigating how we can do this, right? We're in our labs, we're looking at how this is possible. So there's work underway, and the team has made a lot of good progress. I talked to them Monday, I think, or Friday last week, and they talked to me and told me what they're doing. They have a pretty good plan, pretty good ideas in place. But I'm here to tell you that you can still use your Domino data, that's in your NSF, right? Domino's a really good database, right? We all know that. In your applications that are running on Bluemix, okay? And hopefully this is now the face of the pet. There's a lot happening in this picture. So how does this look? How does this work? How do I start doing something like this? There was a couple of sessions yesterday actually we talked about REST and what REST is and why it's important. Nathan loaded up in his modern Domino talk. There's another session, I think either today or tomorrow, specifically just on this topic itself, REST and Domino. But basically there's something called Domino Access Services that's built into Domino. Part of Domino used to be the extension lib, is now part of the base install in Domino since I think 8.5.3 fixed pack 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that, I can't remember. But it's definitely in 9.0 because I have the server I'm using is running 9.0. But basically REST allows you to perform short operations, create, read, update, delete over HTTP. So you make HTTP requests just like you make HTTP requests to a website in your browser. You manipulate the data inside the NSF. And the best part about using this is that it's kind of built into Domino. So you, as Nathan explained yesterday, just enable some basically server property and then a couple of properties on the NSF itself. It's opt-in model, which Nathan hates, but that's what you have to do. And you get these APIs created, and you have to do anything to write any code to do that. Then you can take it a step further and actually write some Java code in your NSF if you want to customize these REST APIs. Or you can take a step further than that and write an OSGI bundle that sits on top of your Domino server if you really want to customize your REST APIs and the data that gets returned from us. But that's the first thing you need to do. You need to have some way of RESTfully accessing the data inside the NSF that you want to use. So here's a very simple diagram. This is basically how the application works today. What I just showed you, there's a new app I just showed you. There's that UI that's in the browser, okay? And that browser is talking over REST to the node code that's running on Bluemix in the cloud, okay? And then actually the way it talks to the cloud is also over REST. The cloud happens to have a very nice RESTful API that you can use. So the server running in Bluemix on Node is actually making REST calls to the cloud service in the cloud. So what if we want to replace this with Domino, right? We can do that. It's really easy, right? Especially when the Domino server is in the cloud already, right? Or publicly accessible from the public internet. It doesn't necessarily be in the cloud. But if you start the Domino server up on AWS or Rackspace or SlothLayer and wanted to use it over there, cool. If you had some server in your own data center that was public-facing to the internet, you can do that too, okay? But I imagine this probably isn't the situation that most of you were in, right? Most of you were in this situation, which is a little bit more difficult, right? My Domino server actually sits behind a firewall somewhere in a private network. And doing this is impossible, right? This thing is the public cloud, right? Anyone can get it. This is sitting on a private network that's behind a firewall that can't be touched from outside the network, okay? But even this is possible, actually. And there's a service that's part of Bluemix called Cloud Integration that makes this all possible. Essentially, what happens is the short story, but basically, if you have your Domino service sitting behind the firewall on a private network, and you install something called a secure connector on a machine that's running the Domino server. And that secure connector creates a tunnel out to a service running in the cloud called Cast Iron Live, or the Cloud Integration Service, and things like that. And then Bluemix talks to this Cloud Integration Service, which knows about your Domino server running behind the firewall and has a tunnel set up to talk to it. So this service can talk to this server behind the firewall, extract data. So this service can call REST APIs that you expose to your Domino server to get the data. And your application talks to that Cloud Integration Service instead of directly to the Domino server. Okay? There's some disadvantages to this, obviously. There's something that's sitting in between you. So obviously there's some performance, right? Cost to that. But you can still fetch your data, you can still access your data. So let's take a look at this. So, Nathan, I'm going to use the command line again. Okay. I have to use the command line for this one.
Sure. Only Ryan.
So, I actually have this code all written for me here. So I'm going to run another terminal window, and I'm going to go into this. So I have the same application code here for my to-do app, except the only difference is that it's using, instead of using Cloud, it's using the Cloud Integration Service to talk to a Domino server behind the firewall. Okay? So here's what my server looks like. Alright, so this is my Domino server. It's running behind the firewall. You can't get to it, but I can since I'm on my network here. It's called the database, the NSF. I made the Domino to-dos. I'm going to open this up. It's probably the simplest database you've ever seen in your entire life. Yeah. It has, but it doesn't matter, right? I don't care about, I'm not using this NSF for an application. I'm using it for the database, right? As a database, right? So it has one view in it. It's called to-dos, and it displays all documents that have the form to do. The form to do has a title, has completed, whether it's been completed or not, and what the order of the to-do is in the list I have. Okay? So I have one to-do in here, which is now running contribute, so hopefully I can do that later on. Yep.
Just so you know.
Oh wow, that was pretty lovely. Thank you. I don't know why it was so close on the screen. I don't know how to fix that situation. Yeah. What if I put this? Does that make any better?
It's the back resolution.
Yeah, I guess so. So trust me that this is the admin one. But I think you guys are all familiar with what this looks like. And everyone, like I said, create the simplest NSF ever. So that's my NSF. I've already enabled the REST APIs on this thing. So if I go to my REST client here, and the URL to my server is sitting at etc203.boston.ibm.com. Again, you can't get to the server sitting behind a firewall, so go ahead and try. When I click send, basically what this API does, this REST API does, is basically return back to me why does it look so crappy all of a sudden? Did it look like that the whole time?
No, that's when you switch to the second. Let me in.
This is a big one, though. I'm going to try this. That's a little better.
Yeah.
Alright, so this URL here will return back to me essentially all the to-do documents in my view. I've done a little bit of customization here, so normally this URL, by default the APIs you get when you enable the Domino REST services on your database, looks something like this. Looks very Domino-y, right? It has things like on-ID, at no-ID, at form, all this stuff, right? My application doesn't care about that, right? Nor do I really even want to expose it to the front end of my app. So I wrote a custom REST API that just returns what I need. So it's the same exact data, just eliminating all those unnecessary fields that I don't care about, and returns me just the title, the order, whether it's completed or not. And the ID is actually just the UNID of the document, but no one really cares about that, right? Okay, so I have this REST API here, and so this is the API that my code actually uses. And what I want to do is now deploy this new code, this new to-do application, which is going to use my Domino server to Bluemix. So the other way to deploy an application to Bluemix is to actually not do that continuous delivery, continuous pipeline thing that I was talking about earlier, that I did initially. Actually just deploy from the command line. By the way, there's also a Eclipse plugin that you can deploy right from your Eclipse client or your Java developer, which is most of you guys know. So to do that, I'm just going to do CF push, right? This is basically CF stands for Cloud Foundry. I talked about Cloud Foundry. This is the command line utility for that project. This is how you deploy an application to Bluemix using your command line. So what this basically is going to do is we're going to go off and create an application called to Domino Node. It's going to be at the URL.ibluemix.net. And it's uploading all the JavaScript, the Node.js code that I have on my machine right now to Bluemix. And now Bluemix has my code, and it's going to go ahead and stand up another node instance in the cloud for me for this application. And now right now what it's doing is essentially downloading all the dependencies from my node application, so it can download all those. It'll package the dependencies, my code, the runtime together, and then actually get that all on the machine and most of the cloud form. So my application's up and running, and now if we go to this URL here, you see the same UI, but now it has the to-dos from my Domino server as opposed to the to-dos from my cloud server. So when I enter a new to-do here, and probably shouldn't do this because it's going to UI level, right? But this is what has that. If I refresh my view, there's other people hitting my application because it's live in the cloud right now. But they're adding more to-dos, right? You see they're all saved in the database here. So if I created a new to-do, it's this one from the admin client. Save that. And you'll see it's here, right here in my view. If I jump back to Firefox here, refresh. So here's the to-do I just created. It's showing up in my UI here. Posted in my cloud application that's publicly facing. Okay. So what about all that magic that about connecting behind the firewall stuff? So I literally don't have enough time. I'm running our meeting right now. I don't have enough time to show you everything about doing that. Luckily, I've created 3 videos on how to do it that I just posted on my blog this morning. But this is that cloud integration service that I was talking about, and this has my basic product APIs listed in it. So it has get all to do's, create a to do, delete a to do, and update a to do. And if I click on these, I've already recreated them, like I said, just to save some time. But this is the public-facing URL that's using the cloud integration service that my application is actually using. It's not using the one pointing to my Domino server, it's using this one. Because the cloud integration service then knows how to talk via that secure tunnel back to my Domino server behind the firewall. So if I hit this API, right, so for example, just to prove here, start right again, let me disconnect from my VPN here. So no longer connected to the network. If I hit this API now, this is the one pointing to my Domino server, you'll see that things go bad, right? I don't get responses back, right? I'm no longer on the network. If I hit this API as part of the cloud integration service that knows how to talk to my Domino server, I get data back. Okay? So that's how it works. And then there's some other stuff in there to create the API and all that stuff that I didn't show, but like I said, there's kind of 3 videos that do show that. So speaking of other resources, I'm just going to jump back to that pricing slide in a second. I can post these slides wherever people really want them. But SlideShare is probably I have an account with SlideShare, I'll post them up there. You guys can find me on SlideShare. These are all links to the resources. This last one shows you all the stuff that I didn't show you about the setting up the API cloud integration service. First link is everything you need to know as a developer for Bluemix, that first link. Developer.ibm.com/Bluemix. That third link, sorry, I kind of jumped all over this. The third link and the fourth link are about using the Domino REST services. So that's documentation out in our wikis. And the second one is essentially using the cloud integration, red book on using the cloud integration service for it's very verbose. Probably not read the whole thing, but I use it a little bit. And just real quickly, pricing, I mentioned real quickly. Go to Bluemix.net today, sign up, you don't have to enter a credit card, you get 30 days to use the platform as much as you want, raise as many applications as you want, use as many services as you want, for free for 30 days. After that, you need to give us a credit card, you can still continue to use the free tier, as long as you don't go over certain limitations, it will tell you what they are. And then you can pay as you go. So So pay for whatever you use, however many applications you have, you know, no commitment, whatever you can cancel at any time. Or you can choose to do subscription-based, basically you buy a lot more, you get a bigger discount type of thing. Like I said, you know, it takes literally 5 minutes to get going. It doesn't take a long time. It's not some powerful process or anything like that. So with that, say thank you, and anyone has any questions? Like, bore you guys to death?
Speaking of cost, somebody comes to me and I'm not saying it's a great fit for Bluemix. It's a little more elaborate than what you got. It's a lot more.
Yes.
It's going to take resources. It's going to take time to build it out. Just potential. How do I figure out what it's going to cost to run that application?
So we publish all the prices, okay? So you pay, you charge it per month, okay? So your costs, if you go to rate the header here, it's not hard to find. There's the pricing. Click on pricing. This tells you the cost for everything, right? So like I said at the beginning, we charge you based on two different things. How much memory are you using for all your applications?
Memory or storage?
Memory, not storage. Storage is a service in the cloud. Okay, it's not. You're not storing. This gets into this gets into building cloud applications architecture. But basically, you never put anything on the file system in Bluemix. Okay, you store it in a service. Most of the cloud elsewhere. Okay. But beyond that, you pay for memory. So if I'm using my application needs 1 gig to run, we'll charge you. So for example, I had a Java app that is using 1 gig a month to run. It's 7 cents per hour, essentially, that it's running. And if you're using less than that, then that price goes. If you're using half that, you're using 512 megs, the price goes about in half.
The storage as a service.
Yeah, so then you add on the services, so the prices for the services. A lot of services have free tiers as well, so if you don't go beyond the free tier, it doesn't cost you anything. You go above the free tier, but the prices are different depending on the service.
Is there any kind of simulator or tool?
Yeah, this is a question. This is a question. Yeah, this is a question.
Tell the customer.
We need to build some type of calculator, essentially. So you enter what you want, what you think you want, and say how much is this going to cost me a month. It's actually pretty easy to have that problem built. Myself, I find some time to do that. The problem is getting this pricing information, you know, not from a static web page.
I think you just put your
Yes, I've heard that request before. It's possible to go in there and sit down and calculate it, but it would be easier if you could.
You've never done one of these. How much memory?
Yeah.
Use this technology. How much memory is it going to use?
Well, you did take how much memory you're going to use, right? I mean, that's up to you. We'll give you as much memory as you want, but we'll charge you.
Right. If you haven't written the application yet.
Well, you should, right, well, but we can't tell you that. I can't tell you how much the application you're going to build is going to, how much memory it's going to use. But you won't really know that until you actually build the application.
Which makes it hard to sell the customer on the idea of building the application for this way, this way, because they don't know.
So if we had some, we built, or here's some benchmarks. We have a simple CRM app. We have a CRM application that's running on Bluemix that costs this customer XYZ. Gotcha. That's 50 mil. Yep.
So the data isn't ever stored as software. It's stored as a data service provider. You have no clue where that is.
You don't necessarily know whether it's stored as software. Some, like for example, you can easily find out that cloud is running on top of software. Okay, we're not going to. It doesn't say that anywhere, but you can easily find it out. But yeah, you don't really know where it is. It could be running on AWS. It could be running on Rackspace. It could be running somewhere else. It's not necessarily have to be in software.
So this is for non-secure applications.
Are you saying that
He's saying if I don't know where the hell my data is, my customers aren't going to want me to put it up there.
Right, so I understand, so, okay, yes, that's the whole point of if your data is sensitive and you want to know where it is, you want to have it on premise, and, in their data center, that's what I just showed you how to do. Okay, what I showed you how to do applies to any REST-based technology. It doesn't necessarily have to be Domino, it could be anything, right? But I chose Domino for the audience. But yes, you can still build a public-facing cloud application that accesses your data on premise using what I just showed you how to do with Domino.
Okay.
Okay? You look not convinced about it.
Yeah. No, I'm convinced. I'm saying I can't sell that to anybody whose data is more than semi-sensitive.
Okay, we can talk after. That'd be interesting.
Now, we've got an application that does it now, and that's what we run into every time. And it runs on software.
Good.
So, but we know where it is, and it's encrypted.
Okay. So your data, you can still point to your data running on software, right? If you have that data already today running software, I'm not going to tell you to move it.
Yeah.
You can still build an application that uses the data. We can talk about it. Interesting. Any other questions?